Hi all. So in today's session we are mainly going to discuss about your Git and GitHub, that is your version control tool guys. Okay, so in the previous session also I have explained you about the brief of this version control tool. Now in today's session we are going to be in depth of this version control tool and we'll try to understand the introduction of this Git and GitHub. At the same time, we'll see how the internal architecture of your Git local repository will be there, right guys? So let me take you through without wasting the time. So jump into this one guys. Okay, so what do you mean by version control tool, right guys? Git and GitHub is a version control tool. I'll come to this part later on. What is the Git local repository and what is GitHub, that is your global repository. But coming to the point, again I am going to repeat the same sentence, that is nothing but your version control tool. So version control tool itself suggests that it's going to maintain the different versions of your code. It doesn't mean that it's going to maintain the different version of the code which is developed by the developer. No, it's not like that guys. Just try to understand, just very clear about this one. Just try to understand this one. Being a DevOps engineer, you have to maintain the different version of the code. What does that mean? You have to maintain the different version of the code. That means if today the developer is coming at work and the developer D1 is coming at work and he started working on a file1.txt, right guys? So what he'll do, he'll start coding and he'll end the coding today. That is done for today, but the coding is not at all completed, right? The next day, tomorrow again he's coming, the same developer, and he's working on the same file called file1.txt. So he'll start from where he ended up his work, right guys? Correct? Are you able to understand my point or not? Right? So this particular version which he worked on day one, it's going to represent as a your v1. Okay, just try to understand this one very carefully. The day one, this particular version, it's going to represent as a v1, and the day 2 from where he starts the work, that is going to represent as a version v2. Okay, now what he'll do, the next day again he'll come, because obviously if he has given a module, like he has to complete the coding for the payment gateway page or a login page, that's going to take time for him, right? Obviously. So the next day, the day after tomorrow, again he's coming back and he'll start from where he ended up his work, right guys? So that is going to be the version v3. Now try to understand very carefully over here. What does that mean by version? So version control tool has the capability and has the ability to move from version v1 to v1. Suppose the developer is coming to you as a DevOps engineer. If you are working as a DevOps engineer, he's asking, I want to jump into the version v1 where the day one he worked into that particular code, right? So that this particular version control tool has the ability that it will be going to provide you the version v1. Same with the version v2. He wants to jump into the version v2 where he done the code on the day 2. Suppose he deleted some of his work. Suppose he modified some of his work, right? So that is what the job of a version control tool. What is a version control tool? Version control tool is nothing but it's a workspace, it's a repository which we are creating for the developers, where they can keep their work, where they can do the continuous modification. And if later on also, if they'll come back and they'll ask you that I want the work which he done in a day one, so you should be capable enough to provide the work which he has done in day one. That is what, if you know the version what he has done in day one, if you know the version what he has done in day 2, okay, that is v1, v2 and v3, you can directly jump into that and you can provide the data to the developer, right? That's what the job of your DevOps engineer. That is what call your version control tool, guys. Are you able to understand my point or not? Yes or no? Okay, now moving back to the next point. Here you are able to see something called Git local repository and Git global repository is there, right? So this particular local repository means what? So local repository is nothing but this is going to be your local server. This is going to be your local machine. It's not like that this is going to be this Windows machine. No, it's not like that. Just try to understand. If you go to this management console, see, if you a server is hosted, where is that server is going to host? It's not going to host in your home, right? that server is going to host in some region. Suppose that region could be Mumbai, that region could be Ohio, that region could be any part of the world, right, where the data center will be. So there only the server is hosted. There should be that Linux server will be there. On top of that Linux server, your Git repository is you are going to install, right guys? Are you able to understand my point or not? So this local repo is fine, but this local repo should be installed, your Git should be installed on top of some server, on top of a Linux server, on top of a Windows server, or it could be any operating system. Correct guys? Are you able to understand or not? But just try to understand over here why I am telling it's local repo. Okay, because there is a reason behind that one. Okay, so a developer D1, D2, D3 and D4, there are total 4 developers which is working on one region. A developer D1, D2 and D3 is working for one region, that is going to be your Mumbai region. For example, just I am taking an example, they were working for Mumbai region. They are connecting from Mumbai region, these particular 4 developers. So if these all 4 developers has to save their work, so where they are going to save his work? So they are going to save their work in the local repository, into some local machine, that is your Linux server. Correct? And this particular Linux server, guys, just try to understand this one very. So they are going to save their work into this Linux machine, into this Linux server where Git repository is installed. Correct? Where your, as a DevOps engineer, you have to install the Git repository, that ultimately you need to create a workspace for this developer where they are going to keep their work, right? So that particular workspace is for all these developer D1, D2 and D3 which is working for a particular reason. That's what guys. And at the same time, you need to provide, being a DevOps engineer, you need to provide the security also. This I'll come later on guys. Means suppose the developer D1, D2 and D3, okay, is working. So you need to maintain a proper security within this local repository also, that the developer D1 is not able to see the work of developer D2 and the developer D2 is not able to see the work of developer D3, like that. That is a security point. That also we need to maintain during this local repository, and this is a job of a DevOps engineer. So what all things you need to do as a DevOps engineer, just try to understand. The first thing is you need to create a local repository. Okay, this local repository is nothing but this could be your local server, that could be a Windows server, that could be a Linux server, that could be a Mac server, that could be Android, any operating system. Okay, where you have to make a workspace for all these developers where they can keep their work. Now try to understand, this is all about your local repo guys. So what is this then global repo? What is this then global repo? Correct? This global repo is nothing but this is going to be your public cloud. Public cloud. So just try to understand this one very carefully. Okay, so what I am telling is, once the work is done by these developers, okay, once the work is done by this developer, and the code you are going to keep up where? The code is going to, you are going to keep it here. Correct? In the local repo, their work has to be saved where? Their work has to be saved in this particular local repo, into their local machine, into the local server. That I'll tell you how to connect to this local server. That is another part which we'll be seeing after this session, that how we can do the installation of this local repository. And being a DevOps engineer, okay, how you have to save the work of this particular developer. So they are not going to save the work, they are just do the what they'll do, they will do the coding, right? And they will do modification to those codings. Means what? They are going to modify some files, they are going to create some file like index.html or gateway.html. Those codes will be there, and that codes has to be continuously modified this developer. But being a DevOps engineer, you need to take care of his work. That's what the job of this is why the DevOps engineer is there. Now coming back to here, just try to understand over here. Okay, as soon as the job is done, okay, means the this particular developers is saving their work in this local repository, then what is the point of having this global repository public cloud? So there will be another set of developer who is working in Singapore. For example, there will be another set of developer who is working in Singapore. So how those developers is going to access the work of a developer which is done by this developer. So they need the module, what they also need to develop some module. So for their module there is a dependency, so they should understand what these developers has done. So they need to see according to that, they will be also going to develop their module. So for that they need their work. So being a DevOps engineer, what you need to do is you need to push the code which is already there. You need to push the code of this particular, whatever the codes in this local repository to the global repository. Until unless if you don't push this code to the global repository, how it could be going to your public cloud? It's not at all possible, right? And other thing is, you should have asked me, Abhishek, then why we cannot do it from here, correct? Why we cannot do it from the local repo? There is a reason behind that one. So if you directly do it from here, then what is the point of having security? There should be a local, see, every, if you understand at a broader picture, when you talk about a security level, right? So how the security level will be there? First the state will be there, then the cities will be there, inside the cities districts will be there, and inside districts small village will be there. So at village level there are different set of peoples will be there who is taking care of the village work, right? So this is how the level of security should be there, guys. Just try to understand this one very carefully. So this is why, this is the reason we were doing over here, right? So we should maintain a local repository. From the local repository you are pushing to the global repository, and from that global repository, as a DevOps engineer who is sitting on Singapore, they have to pull the work from this global repository. Like from the DevOps who is sitting in Mumbai is pushing the work to this global repository. Same as a DevOps engineer who is sitting where, who is sitting in Singapore, or either it could be you also. Okay, so you have to pull the work, whatever is done in this local repo, to the, again there will be another local repository will be there for another set of developer who is sitting in Singapore, guys. Are you able to understand or not? So this is why the global repository in, but in real time scenario, let me show you how it's look like so you'll understand. So this is how, like guys, the global repository will be there. Okay, so you can see I have created a global repository over here. It's a public cloud. Okay, so here you are able to see these multiple files are there, right? So these are the files of my repository. So here just let me understand you. This is nothing but this is the URL of your Git, and this is the username. This is also one interview question they have asked me. That is what they just wanted to show, see that what is this URL stands for. They'll ask you what is that. This is nothing but this is the owner. Okay, and this is nothing but this is the repository name. So they'll ask you the repository name will come or the owner will come. It's look like a silly question, but they'll ask this question in interviews. This is what. Okay, so you need to tell them like that. No, the first owner name will be there, then the repository name will be there, right? So Abhishek 88 Roshan is the owner of this particular Git repository. Okay, so now the next thing is, as of now whatever I am showing you, it's public cloud. I cannot show you in a private environment, right? For same Git repository, if you want to create, so you can create with the public and you can create for the private also, but for the private there will be some charge. Okay, that is for the organizational level, right, where you can maintain security. So as of now, to show you, I am showing you with the public cloud, guys. Are you able to understand or not, guys? Okay, now coming back to the point over here again, try to understand. Now this is all about the global repository. So global repository is nothing but that is, it's a public cloud or it could be a private cloud also. Okay, it depends upon. Fine. Now coming back to here, now you have to understand the Git architecture, guys. So this is all about the introduction of Git, which I have explained till now. Now I am going to explain you more about your Git architecture, and this is very much important. If you don't understand this, you won't be able to navigate within this Git local repository. That is, you have to work within this Git local repository, guys. So just try to understand here very carefully. Okay, listen to me very carefully, and if you have any doubt, any queries, you can write it back to me. I'll try to answer as soon as possible. Now, as I said, for the local repository, so I said what all things you need to do before going to set up a local repository, that is Git installation. Okay, first you need to create an instance. Okay, first you need to create an instance. That also I'll be showing you in the next session how we can create an instance in EC2. Okay, so after creating an instance in the EC2, what we need to do is you need to create a folder called Paytm. Paytm is just an application. It depends upon your project. It could be a Google Pay, it could be a Phone Pay, or any XYZ application will be there. According to that, you need to create a project. So inside that project only you are going to save all the work of your developer. Okay, so just create. This is nothing but Paytm is a folder. Okay, just try to understand. So the first thing is, as soon as you have created an instance, where you have created an instance in EC2, okay, the Amazon Web Services, Elastic Cloud Computing, where you have created the instance. Now the next thing what you need to do is you need to install the Git repository. Before installing the Git repository, you need to create a directory called Paytm. Inside that Paytm directory, you have to get inside to that one. I'll show you this everything in hands-on. I am going to show you. Don't worry about that one. Inside that one, you have to install the Git repository. Then you have to initialize the Git repository. Then this part will come into the picture. That is the internal architecture of this Git repository. And this also interview question they'll ask you. What is the how we can represent the pictorial representation of your Git, of your local repository? If they'll ask you in interview, can you draw, they'll ask you take the pen and paper and show me how the internal architecture of your Git will be there, like your working directory, staging area, and local repo. That is what you need to explain. If you understand this one, so you'll understand everything, guys. Okay, now try to understand over here. What is the first thing you need to do is, first thing you need to create a directory. I said, right, after doing installation, so before doing installation and before initializing the Git, you need to create the directory as soon as you create the instance. And then you have to install your Ubuntu operating system. On top of that, we are going to use Ubuntu operating system. Okay, and inside that Ubuntu operating system, you have to create this folder called Paytm. Inside that, you have to do the installation of Git, and then you have to going to do the Git initialization. Guys, are you able to understand or not? Okay, now once you done creating this one, so because here there is no developer, so you only need to play the role of a developer, and you only need to play the role of a DevOps engineer. But in production environment, it should not be like that. So what this developer will do, they'll create different files, right? They are going to create different files, and they are going to save. They are not going to save. Let me tell you very clearly, you need to save their work. Okay, they are going to start coding, and suppose this developer D1 is working on what? This developer D1 is working on a page called index.html. Okay, or he is working on a login page. The developer D2 is working on a gateway page. So all the developers are going to save the work inside this Paytm directory. So this is, as a DevOps engineer, your job is to make sure how you can segregate the work of a developer D1 to the developer D2 to the developer D3 to the developer D4. This is how we need to maintain security also. Privacy will be also there, right? So the developer should be working on high priority work. The developer 2 is working on some low priority work, right? Developer D3 is working on medium priority work. So that, as a DevOps engineer, your job is to, that is what. So I'll show you how we can create a master branch concept, will come later on guys. Okay, this is how we need to create the workspace each and every developer by creating branches within one master. Okay, but as of now, as a whole, you have created a directory. Okay, inside this directory, all these developers is going to save their work. Okay, done. For example, what I'm going to do over here is, so this developer file1.txt, okay, he created a file called file1.txt. Now try to understand, being a DevOps engineer, what all things you need to do over here. So as soon as he created the file1.txt, the file1.txt will be in working directory. In Git architecture, in Git local repository, there are total 3 components. The first component is called your working directory, the second component is called your staging area, and the third component is called your local repository. Now let's understand one by one what is this working directory. So as soon as the developer is created a file1.txt, the file is by default will be in your working directory. Just keep this structure in your mind, then only you will be able to operate within your Git repository, guys. Then only you will be able to execute different commands within your Git repository. So as soon as this file is created, and the file will be in your working directory, guys. So always whenever the file is even modified and file is created, the file will be first in your working directory. The reason is, whenever working directory is nothing but where the file will be in untrackable mode. Untrackable mode, just try to understand this one. The file will be in untrackable stage. You cannot track that file. Let me give you an example. When you go to a jungle, okay, suppose you forgot, you have lost, okay, then a ranger has to find you. Then what those rangers are going to do? They are, until unless you cannot be trackable when you are going to put your foot marks, or you should be trackable when your foot marks should be there, right? Before that, the particular before that you are untrackable. So same way here also, as a DevOps engineer, if you want to track this file, okay, the file won't be trackable, because if suppose the what this developer are not going to create the work again and again. What they'll do continuous modification with this file. Then how you'll come to know what modification that developer is doing? That is the job of a DevOps engineer. Then only you will become to know. Suppose he came today, he done some modification, again you have to save his work. Before saving his work, so you need to see what modification he's done with that work. So how you come to know? You need to track that work, right? Correct. So same way, the initially when the work is in working directory, the work is untrackable. You cannot track that one. So what you need to do is, you need to add that file to the staging area. You need to add the file to staging area, or you can push the file to the staging area. Then only the file, which is file1 dot txt, will be in trackable stage. Okay, so once the file will be pushed to your staging area is nothing where the file could be trackable. Okay, that is the definition of this staging area. This file1.txt will become green, guys. Okay, and this file will be, you are being a DevOps engineer, you will be able to track this file. So here I can mention it's trackable. Just try to understand, the file will be absolute trackable stage. Okay, even if you modify so many times, so for that you need to again push it to the staging area to track that file. Now the next thing is, once the file is trackable, so what you need to do, guys? Are you able to understand this one or not? So just try to understand it like this one. So you need to push the file to the local repo. Why we are pushing the file to the local repo? The work which is done by the developer is or the work which is modified in file1.txt, that has to save, right? The work has to be saved. If the work is not saved, how you will make sure that the work is completed, right? So if that to understand that one, okay, so what you need to do as a DevOps engineer, you need to push that file to the local repo. You need to save the file to the local repo. So as soon as you save the file to the local repo, again I am telling, once the file will be in file1.txt in local repo, the file will be again untrackable. This is interview question. So when will be your file trackable? So only when the file will be in staging area, then only the file will be trackable. And then before and after, it is not at all trackable. Before and after of your staging area, it is not at all trackable. When it is in working directory, the file is not trackable. Again, when it will be in local repo, file will not be trackable. The reason is because here the file is untrackable. It is newly created or it is just modified, but when it is in local repo, the file is absolutely saved. You have to commit to save the work of the file1.txt of this developer. You have to commit means what? Just try to understand. In a database, if you update a query, if you insert a query, okay, or if you do anything, then what you will do last? You need to commit. You need to save the work. Then only it's going to reflect. Guys, are you able to understand or not? Yes or no? Okay, so in other words, those who doesn't know the database, let me tell you very clearly. If I am working in this, for example, in this paint only, I have worked this many teams. Okay, so if I don't save my work, it will be vanished. It will be gone, right? If my system got rebooted just now, okay. So if I don't save my work, how I'll come to know what work I have done? So same way with these developers, as a DevOps engineer, you need to save their work, right? If you don't save their work, then what is the point of developing that module, right? So you need to save the work, guys. So this is why we are pushing it to the local repo. So just keep this particular diagram in your mind. Everywhere they are going to ask you, this is all about the internal architecture of your local repository, that is the Git, guys. Now in the upcoming session, I'm going to show you how we can do the installation of your Git. Okay. So thank you for watching this video, guys. And if you have any doubt, any queries, you can ask me at any point of time.